Hey, it's Brian.
Hey, it's Barry.
And it's Nate.
And welcome to the Collecti-Bros podcast. Today's topic is the collector's edition of Days Gone, part of our mainline series of Is It Worth It? And if you're new, welcome. And if you don't know what that is, it's when we take a comprehensive look at a game and we look at the story, the graphics, the gameplay, the sound/music, the price and collectability, and overall, is it worth it? The main reason why I picked this game, Barry did a collector's edition episode last year. I thought that was really interesting. Like, this is a video game collector.
Did I?
Shadow of Colossus, yeah.
Oh, I guess it was a special edition.
Special edition,
okay.
yeah. But no, as a video game collecting podcast, this is something that's made for us collectors, right? This is what separates collecting from playing, even though, you know, we do both around here, unlike some people. Excuse me. No, but that's the thing with this game. Like, you can go out and buy a normal copy of this game relatively cheap, but the collector's edition is kind of what sets it apart. And I wanted to play something a little more modern. I've had this game since it came out. Just never got around to playing it. So this was one of the only ways I was getting around to playing an old PS4 game that I never got around to, so it worked out really well. Before we get started, please, I invite you all to check us out on social media. We are at Collecti-Bros Pod on all major platforms.
I guess as long as TikTok lives now.
Yeah, taking Time Bomb. That's great, because that's our most popular. Anyway.
It's fine.
It's fine.
Someone will buy
It's
it.
fine.
Use
no,
your VPNs.
They're not up for sale and TikTok's suing the US.
Yeah.
Oh, that's great.
That's going to be super
That
interesting.
won't get ugly at all, I'm sure.
No. Fallout.
They already said they're not selling, so.
Yeah. Which, I mean,
I don't blame them.
Yeah.
Like, whatever. Let's not get,
Fallout's going to happen a lot sooner. It's going to be over TikTok.
Well, either way, if TikTok falls through the cracks, everyone knows Facebook/Meta has fallen.
Yeah.
X has fallen.
Yeah.
Instagram is sort of also fallen because it's Meta. So what you guys should do is join the Discord.
There you go.
Yep.
Great turnaround, Barry.
Join the Discord.
It's true, though. We're the most active on there. It's the best way to talk to us one-on-one. We're all pretty much on there every day. So check us out on Discord. That link to join the Discord is in the show notes of every episode. Without further ado, and starting Fallout early, let's jump into some backstory of this game. So, Days Gone. It's an open-world action game. It's a game developed by Ben Studio. You guys know them from Siphon Filter back on the PS was their biggest hit. But they did a really good job of supporting Sony during the handheld era. During the PSP era, they did Resistance, which was a great PSP version of that game. They did...
Do they only do the PSP Resistance?
They did, yeah, because Insomniac did the main one. They did... Uncharted for the Vita was a launch title, so it was like a really big primary Vita title, really shut off the graphics.
Yeah, that was supposed to be a Vita seller.
Right, and then they also did Killzone on Vita, which was great. So like they have some track record with some of Sony's like bigger properties in a different media, so it's really interesting. They are a first party Sony studio, that's why they get the go ahead to do stuff like that. But this is actually their first console game since the port for Logan's Shadow on PS2. So this is how long they haven't worked on a console game. So of course they picked this really big, ambitious, open world PS4's next gen at the time game right after working on the Vita. So Sony was like, "Are you sure this is what you guys want to do?" And they're like, "Very much so, absolutely. Like, we want the challenge." This game was in development for 6 years, so a long time. Could have used some more time in that oven, quite frankly, but we will get there. The devs said they were heavily inspired by Sons of Anarchy, Walking Dead, and World War Z. And for anybody that's actually played this game, no shit, right? It's pretty obvious. Even playing it, I remember, telling Barry and Nate, I'm like, dude, this is literally like that episode of South Park where the manatees are creating Family Guy jokes. If you guys haven't seen it, basically they have this tank of like these balls, and it has like an idea on this ball. These manatees take 3 of them to a tank, and they make an episode of Family Guy and make a joke for Family Guy. This game's an amalgamation of that. It's just 3 concepts, Sons of Anarchy with the motorcycles, Walking Dead with zombies, and then the flood system, or the horde, if you will, for World War Z. So it's completely inspired by that. You can tell 100%. The dev team started with 50 people, and they were like 100% convinced that they could make this game with 50 people. They pitched it to Sony, and Sony was like, "Are you sure? This seems very ambitious for 50 people." And Ben's really ambitious, and they want to like be the underdogs. They thrive off that's what they were saying in the development for this game. And they quickly realized they need a lot more people, and it eventually got up to like 130, 200 people plus with supporting studios from Sony, because Sony was basically dumping assets in this game as well. Another interesting fact about this game, it's the first game that PlayStation ported over to the PC. It started that whole craze for PlayStation having their games go to PC. This game was published by Sony, released on the PlayStation 4 April 26, 2019, and PC May 18, 2021. And also, I want to, before we start jumping into the story of this game, where I think we're going to spend most of our time, another reason why I picked this game, because I randomly stumbled across an article about, like, you should give Days Gone a chance in 2024, and I was like, that's really random, like, okay. But then they're like, just look at the Steam reviews. Like, I know at launch, this game had a lot of issues with bugs, and all the Steam reviews are crazy. I mean, it's like a 9 out of 10 on Steam right now. And this game's, it's more than beloved. I was going to say beloved, but like, people are passionate about how much they love this game, and to defend it with like knives and guns, it's crazy. But it's really interesting, so I wanted to see what the hype was about, and there is so much to talk about with this game. I definitely don't think we'll be out of short for any topic of this game. It's a very divisive game, and after playing it and going through it, I definitely see why. But let's jump into this story.
Are you gonna give like the Cliff Notes version? Like, how are you gonna?
I have a
Good luck.
All right. Okay.
Or if one of y'all want to do it, since I know I've been talking a lot.
Hell no.
All right, the story of this game, truth be told, is I don't think I'm gonna say anything controversial here. This is our biggest criticism for the game overall. All three of us, literally.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna lie. So like, I took my notes for this game while I was playing it, and like, I had to go back and redo all of them, because literally it was just, what the fuck? Why? What is this? Like, this makes zero sense. What is the story? Like, what? I was literally screaming at myself, and I was like,
and what's the wild thing to me is that's what's heralded.
yes,
Yeah.
When you go look at reviews, people say this game's better than The Last of Us.
oh yeah, and it's not just one person.
In full discretion, Last of Us is going to be brought up quite a bit during this podcast, because the correlations of the games, and then paired with the fact that they're both super narrative driven.
Well, and the devs brought it up. The devs made a comparison, because when they were developing this game, Last of Us came out, and there was a Game Informer video interview, and they were like, hey, you guys concerned like this is similar? And they're like, no, and Sony knows it's not either. Like, they support us 100%. There are parallels with the narrative story driven, blah, blah, PR answer. But yeah, this game wanted to be Last of Us really bad. We'll put it like that. So the way I figured we tackle the story, it's a long, meaty game. I mean, it's like 40 hours, right? Very narrative driven. Yeah. But I figured I'll give a very abridged version of the story. I mean, kind of highlight some, I almost said positives and negatives. Positives and negatives, I guess, because it's not all bad.
All right, let's hear your abridged version.
Things about it.
I don't know how you're going to do it.
Just like full discrepancy for anyone who's about to be confused. Like, my wife asked me what I was playing and what's going on, so I tried to explain to her story, and she was like, what are you saying? Like,
oh, I did the same
you're
thing.
so all over the place. So.
I tried to explain the story too, and I was just met with like glossy eyes.
Yeah, it's like, huh? So good luck, Brian. Go ahead.
That's funny.
Where's yours?
I was even telling Sherry, we all have a story of trying to communicate to our partners about what's going on with this. I was like, it's kind of like CW, Sons of Anarchy with zombies.
CW.
It's like, it sounds great. I was like, all right. So basically, the game is set in Central Oregon. It's also where Ben's studio is. It's kind of interesting, but they were trying to brainstorm where to put this game, and they realized, hey, our backyard's beautiful. Like, let's put it there. There's a lot of varied environments. You have woods, you have mountains. I do think it's an interesting setting for the game.
Isn't there a desert area?
I don't think so.
Okay.
Well, there's kind of I know what you're talking about.
The
like
left side of the map that seems like very desert.
It's like trenched.
Yeah, the
out.
story is they burnt everything.
Okay.
The militia's trying to burn. Yeah.
I, for some reason in my brain was like, don't we go to Texas at some point? And I thought that was Texas.
No. But there is varied biomes. And I think it's a great setting. I think it's a unique setting. It's cool that the studio's there. So like a lot of the locations, they match up one for one. It's pretty awesome. But back to the story. you play as Deacon St. John. He's basically this biker who 2 years ago, when the shit started to hit the fan, the night shit goes down, and finally it's like, we have to get out of town because this virus is spreading very quickly. You're in town with your best friend Boozer and your wife Sarah. She gets stabbed by a little kid, so she's bleeding profusely. It's like a, horrible flesh wound where she has to get to a hospital or she's not going to make it. So the government's extracting people by chopper. You're basically at gunpoint. You take the scientist and you're like, you're taking my wife. She needs to get off this chopper. Where are you guys going though, so we can meet up later? He's like, we're going to a refugee camp. So 2 years passed, the refugee camp got overran.
It's like a hard cut. Like the chopper flies off and it's a hard cut. Or it says Days Gone Since. That's the whole title. I didn't mean to cut you off. I always wondered like why it was called Days Gone. And then when it cut to that black screen and it was like 600 and whatever days gone.
Yeah.
I was like,
and every time you pause
it.
Yeah.
But that's literally the only relevancy of.
Fun fact, it was originally called The Dead Don't Ride. And then the studio
No.
Sony was like, no. Like, Days Gone. They said, yeah, we worked pretty heavily with marketing to fix that. No shit. But
The Dead Don't Ride?
Yeah. This game's cool. It's got edge. But anyway.
No.
So you get on the chopper, 2 years pass, and you're like looking for her. Everybody kind of assumes your wife's dead. But basically you're a bounty hunter at this point, riding around with Boozer, collecting bounties, just surviving. There's no way to live.
Well, Deacon doesn't think his...
Right.
Like he fully believes his wife is dead because they go to the camp where they were supposed to meet up and there's no survivors. Like none.
It's like completely overrun by hordes.
Completely horde road. Like everyone's dead.
He's got a big rock with her name carved into it. He talks to. So, but lo and behold, there's a little trickle of hope that she may be alive. And then for some reason, everybody you ever meet in the game proceeds to give you copious amounts of shit for even thinking that your wife could still be alive. They're supposedly your friends. But anyway. Long story short, a whole bunch of nothing happens for a good 20 hours, where it kind of like you have these basic interactions where you're supposed to know what happened 2 years ago, but you really don't. So there's a lot of like survival camps set up, and you're basically doing runs and errands for these different survival camps. One's like very militia based. One's like a work camp, which, kind of Auschwitz-y, but whatever. And then the other one is, kind of like the most normal people bound together, trying to like everybody works, but we're not going to like slave labor it. It's like the most normal camp. And that's the one that...
Is it the Iron Mike camp?
Yeah, and that's the one Deacon got kicked out of, so it's a lot of friction there.
Why did he leave / get kicked out of?
He disagreed with Iron Mike's management. He thought Iron Mike was too soft and going to get everybody killed.
Oh, because he's a pacifist.
Yes.
Okay, anyways. There's a lot of pieces to this.
Yes, there's a lot of moving parts.
So much. Yeah, so long story short, basically Boozer gets hurt, and you have to end up going back to the camp, and everyone's like...
He specifically gets hurt by the
Rippers,
religious Ripper, culty, whatever, shave their head.
Right.
They want to be zombies.
There's a group of, like, cult, they worship the Freakers, as they call them. Horrible name, by the way. Horrible name.
They basically want to be freakers.
Yeah.
They want to be zombies.
So it's just like getting...
Without going and getting turned into a zombie, but they want to be one.
Right. And there's not just 10 of them. There's hundreds of them. There's 100 of people still alive that think like this. But anyway.
And you specifically get ambushed by them.
Right.
Which is relevant to the story later.
Yeah, that's true. Yep.
So... Go ahead.
Because there's so much here.
This is
and
relevant
it's
to
not
Arc 1.
And jumping with random shit. I think the overarching theme is like you're trying to get by, then there's little subplots that interject randomly until... the climax at the end of the game.
Yeah, before we keep going, like the way this game is set up is there's not really like a main quest and then there's side missions. Everything is a main quest.
Yep.
And they do it in whatever order.
Yeah,
I don't know if you can kind of do it in your own order, but sometimes it sort of doesn't make sense to do it in that order.
Yep.
But it's a main quest broken up into parts that you can do in whatever order you want.
It's interesting, too, because there's basically like a tab where you can keep track of these sub-stories that all add to the overarching narrative of the game. So like you're saying, you don't have to do it. There's not like a main story you can just play through and then mop up the rest of the dots later.
But it's also interesting because like you can't progress too far in one of the links.
Without doing the rest.
Because it'll like it does allow you to do things in whatever order you want to, but it will not progress until you've gotten to a certain point with another one, and then it'll trigger and says, okay, you guys can move on to the next part now. So ultimately it doesn't even matter what order you do that in. You have to do them all up to a certain point, and then you can do the next set.
Yes.
So it kind of, they wanted the same, and I'm going to say it multiple times, they can't commit to one thing. They wanted to make a very large scope story and give us the quote unquote freedom and agency to follow it however we wanted to, but then restricted us.
Yep.
Yeah.
So it's like, what did you want? To tell a certain story a certain way or to let us discover it? Because at the end of the day, it didn't matter what order you did it in.
Correct.
This game, just even trying to like puzzle it back together, it gives me such a fucking headache. Like,
Seriously, it's cannot describe enough how scattered.
again, I don't give a fuck. The best analogy is these manatees from South Park making a Family Guy joke, because they just take ideas and they mesh them together. But eventually, you have to take Boozer back to this camp that you used to be a part of, and there's conflict, and they're like, oh, you need to do something nice.
Because he's literally like blood poisoning, gonna die.
Right.
Yeah, it's like hallucinating and stuff.
So they save him, they cut off his arm, that comes into shit later, I guess, whatever.
You can imagine how a biker would feel to get one of their arms cut off.
No, you can't ride your bike. That's all.
The dude,
all
was
this
it
man
his right
has.
arm?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Dude can't use the throttle anymore. How are you supposed to ride a bike?
Yep.
If his left arm got cut off, he can't use a clutch. How are you supposed to use a bike? So you can imagine how that went.
Well, to make him feel better, you give him like a sword arm. That's a side quest. So
It's also an ice cream scoop.
because it's
Yeah.
sick. Oh, that's the second.
the-
That's Boozer
that's
2.
what
That's
saves it
3.0. That's Boozer 3.0 with the ice cream scoop. God, this game. Okay, so basically, long story short, super abridged. You basically make a deal with Iron Mike, the leader of like the camp of the quote good people, and you're like, I want to go up north. Maybe my wife's there. I got a lead. And he's like, if you do, you're never coming back. Boozer can stay though. He's a good guy. And you're like, all right. So as you're driving up there, he's literally like, you can stay. These people need help. Like, goddamn, the way these characters interact with you makes no fucking sense.
Wait, are we at the part where he goes to...
Join the militia.
Okay, but let's roll back for 1 second.
What'd I
We
forget?
forgot
What'd
one
I
very
forget?
important thing.
Yeah.
You forgot about Nero.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah. How could I forget?
So
So it's actually like I guess if you had to pick the main.
that's like the trigger.
Yeah.
So there, and it feels like a random event that happens at some point in the main story of the multiple things you're doing. It just kind of happens at whatever point, but it doesn't. Nero was the government agency that initially like transported everybody and got refugees out in the beginning, and you see a Nero chopper, and he's like, "Oh, I'm gonna go after it." So you go after the Nero chopper, and you overhear the name O'Brien. And the relevancy of that is O'Brien was the graduate student who took your wife on the chopper
Right.
initially.
He's the guy that helped load her on board.
And so, last Deacon remembers is he was told we were going to go to this refugee camp, and he assumed everyone there died. So he's like, if O'Brien is still alive and that's where they took my wife, then what happened to my wife? So now his whole goal is to follow these Nero things around and be like, maybe I can figure out where O'Brien is and talk to him and figure out what actually happened to my wife.
Right.
which happens
And Boozer's telling you the whole time, like, you need to stop following those
Yeah.
choppers. It's like a dead end. There's no way your wife's still alive, whatever.
Everybody gives you so much shit
Yeah.
for even holding on the hope that your wife's still alive.
Yeah.
It's so weird.
Well, I think like the tone's weird too. It starts off where he's like, okay, I'm trying to get answers what happened to her. Not that like maybe she's
Right.
alive, but then like you basically confront the scientist guy. Like, this is an act one. I would say there's 3 main acts in this game. Act one's when the first helicopter appears. You kind of follow Brian around. You start doing jobs for him.
Well,
You're stalking him for a while.
you stalk him for a while, and you are able to get him one-on-one.
Yeah.
Because they're in these like hazmat suits. They've got guns. Like
Bulletproof
the
hazmat
game
suits.
basically structures it as like you can't fight these guys; they'll kill you.
Yep.
It's stealth.
Yep.
It's siphon filter mode. Like there's no shooting or fighting these guys. So you finally get him by himself, and you're gunpoint like, "Hey man, what happened?" And he goes, "We didn't go to that camp because we got word it got overrun. We went to another one." He's like, "I don't know what happened to your wife, but she was stable. Last I saw her, she was getting help." And that's when he's like, "You need to find out what happened to her." So in exchange for the information of what happened to your wife past that point, you have to do secret jobs for him because all of the Nero things, they're like not communicating with each other, and they're going on secret Black Ops missions for whatever.
Typical
So there's a
government
whole
stuff.
another story arc with Nero
Yep.
in combination with the Iron Mike, in combination with whatever that one guy taught you how to hunt. What was his name?
Oh, yeah.
Copeland.
Copeland.
Cope.
And then you've got the other lady who basically works everyone as work slaves.
That character was
The
awful.
old lady that looks
The
like
old lady.
Hank Hill's dad.
Yeah. Her, and then you've got the combination with Boozer, and there's like 5 or 6 like stories going on all at one
Oh,
time.
and don't forget the then backstory, the flashback scenes, because that's like a mission also where you have like the time before days were gone and you meet your wife and like it shows the first time you meet her, and then it shows that she works in this lab, and as soon as she works in the lab, I was like, I wonder what that means.
Oh
like,
no, the first cut scene we see of her is when you initially meet her, like when Deacon meets her for the first time.
Her car breaks down.
Yeah, her car breaks down, and he like puts her on the bike and was like, "I'm gonna ride you up here because there's no cell phone service." You know, he's like, "You're a biker." He's like, "Well, I'm not really, a biker. I don't know, whatever."
Well, I used to be a Marine, but
yeah, we don't talk about that. No, he was in the Army. He was not a Marine.
Right,
10th Mountain. They say that 100 times.
Yeah,
you're in a 10th Mountain. You should know how to use a gun. It's a rifle.
No, but she mentions, I'm a scientist out here researching plants. And I said, oh, okay.
I said, yeah, that's going to come back into the story at all.
Okay,
But yeah,
they use the flashbacks as like a story progression vehicle where, like, there was one example of a character in Iron Mike's camp trying to teach another character how to ride a bike. And that flashback to Deacon trying to teach Sarah the first time how to ride a bike. And in that backstory, it triggers another memory for him of thinking, I could go try this, or I could do this, or I might need to go here and do this thing. So the flashbacks are sort of like weird ways of railroading the story in a direction that's supposed to make sense.
It's a fucking mess, though.
So
it's probably the least messy thing of all the mess, though. Like, there's a couple parts where it worked.
I actually liked them.
Yeah,
I liked them because it gave you, the whole point of the story is to find Sarah.
Right.
Like, once we find out that she is potentially alive, the point is to find her, or if we can't find her, find what happened to her.
Right.
And so getting the backstory of their relationship, I liked that in the flashback scenario.
It kept you caring for her, kept you wanting to, like, find her as a player. And
that's how that string made me feel like that was the main story.
I agree.
But there were so many other there's so many things that happen in this game that we were expected to know previous knowledge of that we never got. That could have had a flashback for, we never got them. Yep. I.e. the Rippers.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, yeah, when it turns out it's your boy from the MC.
Coincidence,
He's like, is that Rico, or where the fuck his name is? Like, you're supposed to know who that is.
Carlos?
Yeah.
Well, it was Carlos, and then he goes by another name.
Right.
His human name.
But the whole time you're being hunted by the Rippers, right? You and Boomer are getting hunted by the Rippers, and you guys don't know why.
It's Boozer.
Is it Boozer? It's Boomer now.
Boomer.
I can't even get these names straight.
The Pacers mascot.
It's Boomer, Boozer. And you guys like don't know why the Rippers like care about hunting you down. They're like, there's a bounty on you. Like the Rippers want you.
Yeah, they're like specifically leaving notes that have like the Mongrels, which is your motorcycle gang logo on it and stuff.
Because you still wear your cut for whatever reason.
And so they're like, okay, we don't really know why the Rippers want to fuck with us, but like whatever. We just need to get out of here and get away from him. Turns out the leader of the Rippers, his name is Carlos, who is also trying to broker a deal with Iron Mike.
Oh, yeah, the ceasefire. I forgot about that shit. Jesus Christ, there's so much to this fucking story.
Once Deacon and Boozer dead, because they were all in the same motorcycle gang prior to the outbreak.
Right, and they like kicked him out.
And prior to the outbreak, something, I can't remember exactly what happened or what he did, but he did something where the motorcycle gang was like, we're basically kicking you out. You're not allowed in here. And when you get kicked out of the gang, you have to basically surrender anything that you have, like your vest and your patches and everything. The problem is with him is he had the entire thing tattooed on his back.
Oh yeah, so he burnt it off.
He has a grudge against Deacon. Yeah, he has a grudge against Deacon and Boozer because they held him down and basically blowtorched the skin off of his back before he got sent off to jail. So that's why. But it's only. But the thing is it's only explained literally in a monologue at the point when he captures you, and we're just like, who is this guy?
It's like you're supposed to know all these characters.
When he comes in and you see him for the first time, Deacon's like, "Holy shit, it's you, Jim," or whatever his name was. I can't remember.
His real name
and I literally was Carlos, like watching it, and I was like, who?
Yeah.
Who is this guy? And so they're talking back and forth like we know who this character is. Like, I give a shit.
Right.
I was like, I don't know who this guy is. And he's just like, you and him held me down when you torched my back, and now I'm going to return the favor to all your... Like, he's going to blowtorch all your tattoos off is what he's going to do. Right. But I was like, here's a great point of when we could have, like... The importance of Deacon and Boozer being still part of this motorcycle gang was not touched on at all.
Mm-mm.
And it was a real big part of their identity and themselves of being drifters because they always wore their vests and their cuts. They never took that off.
And it's
ever.
funny too. They talk about the leader. Like, remember you find that puppy, and like Boozer names the puppy after the leader.
Jack.
Like you're supposed to know who this guy is, but
I'm
they
supposed
never
to know who he
They
is.
talk about like 3 or 4
just
times.
breeze
You're
over
just
him.
like, yeah, Jack's a good guy.
He's so pivotal to all their lives, and even Iron Mike, and yet no one, like, I can't tell you a single thing about him other
Like,
than
here's
he
the
would have
thing.
hated being called his dog.
You know, Boozer gets all sad because his arm gets cut off and he gets depressed, as a man would. But, you know, the treating depression in post-apocalyptic times is finding a puppy. And giving a puppy to him.
Yes.
And now he's fine.
A knife arm and a puppy will pretty much cure everything.
But there's so much backstory with the game, because even then, like, there's a flashback of the wedding of Sarah and Deacon, and nobody from his gang came.
Or her family, yeah.
Or her family came, except for Boozer.
Just the booze man.
But they never touch on, like, why?
Well, you know, like,
Why none of
there's
them
2 things I
came?
want to roll back on really quick. So, like,
Oh, they do say why Deacon doesn't, because he goes like basically part-time, which is hilarious.
part of what I was going to say is like the guy
he,
quits
like,
his
stepped
motorcycle
down
gang,
from a
like,
role.
no one
He's
tries
like-
to
It's
kill
a
him.
name.
He
Like,
didn't quit, but he was taking
like
less
part-time.
responsibilities.
Yeah, which like I don't know if that's how
Mongrel, right? Is what
one
they call it?
percenter.
The
motorcycle-
mongrel.
That's the gang.
No,
that's the actual gang's name.
There's a name for it. It's on the bottom of his Nomad. Yeah,
that's right.
So it's like I don't know. I've never been in a motorcycle gang, full transparency, but I'm pretty sure if you're like a 1 percenter, you don't just get to like, hey, I'm going to go ahead and settle down with a scientist. And like, I don't think that's how that works.
Side note, this is the shittiest motorcycle gang ever. They don't do anything. Like, what do? They grow a little bit of weed, which, by the way, is 100% legal in Oregon. Like, what do?
They got 1 percenter patches, though. So
Yeah,
like, they clearly like do
They
something.
watch Sons of Anarchy. They're like, yeah, that's me.
The other thing, do you guys remember how like he sparks the puppy? Like, we should get Booze made a puppy. Because when you go to meet O'Brien one time, Boozer wants to come with you because he just wants to get out of farm duty. So like you go meet O'Brien, which is like the scientist guy, if you guys already forgot. You come back and he's like gone. You find him like fighting rippers with like his knife hand.
Oh, he's drunk, right?
Because they're like because they're in town like murdering dogs randomly.
Oh yeah,
and you're like, what the hell? And it shows these dudes just like murdering dogs, and he's like, motherfuckers are killing innocent puppies, and you're like, I should get him a puppy. Like that's how he remembers to get him one.
Yep.
So yeah, like watching these dogs get literally tortured and murdered by these skinhead like cult dudes is always like, Boozer should get a puppy.
But then in the mix, the doctor lady, I think whatever her name was, where she wasn't actually a doctor, she was a veterinarian.
Addie.
Yeah, I think at one point she basically mentions that like,
gotta kill his soul, not just his wound.
something about Boozer needing something else to take care of because he has nothing to take care of and he won't take care of himself.
He can't pet his arm anymore. He needs to pet a dog.
I don't know, but.
Yeah.
So, anyways, Nero.
It's gonna sound like we're just like randomly firing. But
Nero,
that's how this game is, though.
Nero is the reason why you go to the militia, because you hear from O'Brien that she was in a militia camp.
So basically, you go over the mountains up north, and that's the third part of the game. And you join the militia, and it turns out your wife's still alive, and she's very actively involved in the militia. And you have this great...
She's like an officer.
Right. And by the way, there's no fraternization in this militia. All business, right? So, like, you first see it and you think it's going to be like this moment of embrace. I want to remind everybody really quick, too. It's been 2 years, not 20 years. And she's like, here's a clipboard. Go get some flowers for me. And that's how you, like, find your wife after... You're even, like... It's crazy because Duncan's literally saying, like, we're all
butchering everyone.
This game's so fucked, dude. He's like, you're the reason why I kept going for the past... He's like, you're the reason why I kept going for the past 2 years. And she's like, well, here's a clipboard.
Well, it's funny because like
such an awkward reunion, and it's so fucked up. And she's like worse than Skylar White. It's so fucked up.
So
dude.
Deacon like goes to this militia camp, and his whole thing is like he had such. We don't talk about his time in the military. All we know is that Humvee rolled over and killed everybody inside except for him, and he dragged all of his buddies out.
All his homies, a sergeant, everyone.
And he always talks about like how he's like not going back to it. He's done his time. Right. And then he goes and just
joins the militia.
Right hand up, joins the militia.
Yeah, so he gets over the mountain and sees like the militia dude's getting attacked by like a zombie bear and saves him. And then he's like, well, need you to list. He's kind of like, all right. It's like literally that fast.
Because the guy has Sarah's ring.
Okay, let's talk about that for a second. So when you enlist in this militia, you have to give up all of your personal items. So like you can see like he's struggling with like taking off of his jewelry because I'm assuming they have some, you know, sentimental value to him to his like previous time in his motorcycle gang. Or whatever they call it, I don't know. So he's like, you can tell he's like second thoughts. And then he's like, okay, he's going to take it off. So they surrender all of their personal effects. And at one point in time, I can't remember if it's Sarah or somebody else, but she says, oh, I believe they took them all and melted them down for whatever, like if they needed bullets or if they needed
for the other guy's
nails.
project, the guy's making bombs.
Was it okay? So whatever bits of metal you put in bombs, they melted everyone's personal effects and jewelry down for that. So that's why she doesn't have this like
dog
raven head, whatever ring. I think it's a Cerberus. It looks it looks like a bird head at the same time. Fucked. So that's why she doesn't have this ring. But the thing is it's on the hand of the other captain that you first meet, which triggers you into being like, Sarah's been here. That's my ring. Why does he have my ring? But they never talk about how he got the ring.
Yep.
They never talk about... So my assumption was she gave it to him and they were having some kind of an affair.
That's how I thought too.
I thought that was going to be part of the story, or I was
he
like...
just saw it was like, yo, and like stuck it on his finger.
Which I guess is
apparently... He turned out to be like one of the only decent characters in this whole game.
Yeah.
Which is apparently, you know... I guess what happened, I guess the captain just gets to have his fill for whatever jewelry. But
I think every other character's having an affair with every other character in this game.
Before the captain reveals that, he had a wife and thinks about her a lot, I was like, oh, Sarah gave this bitch
I thought it was like, oh,
the
what's
ring.
this?
I was like, oh, she's over here having an affair with this dude.
And that's why she ain't interested, bro.
But that wasn't the case.
You got us. That was the biggest swerve of the game.
That literally would have been interesting. Or I was like, oh, this would have been interesting. No, he just has the ring, even though they melted all down.
They didn't do it because Walking Dead did it.
Yeah, no shit. So, to wrap up this story in the most abridged way possible, your wife's basically working on the cure while the other scientists at this camp's working on a way to destroy the infected. So your wife's basically like, we need to get back
She's secretly working on the cure.
Right. So she's like, we need to go back to this old lab. Turns out she's shocked they were working on the virus. Like, I saw it literally 2 hours into the game, but okay, whatever. And you basically end up like, we got to save my wife out of this camp, because you get out, you go back to Iron Mike's camp, and you're like, these guys are bad news, let me tell you. What am I forgetting? Jesus fucking Christ.
We're forgetting about Schizo, who I feel like is a pretty important character. So,
go ahead.
You have to keep interjecting. I'm sorry, but
it's
like,
fine. It's so
Schizo has extreme relevancy of a lot of things that happen.
Iron Mike's camp. If you guys have ever seen Malibu's Monet, it looks like Jamie Kennedy in that movie. But
J-Rock from Trailer Park Boys.
But he's like basically Iron Mike's right hand man. Through a long series of events, he's
one of the right hand man.
One of them,
which is also the other woman who wants to bone you the whole time.
Has a girlfriend that tries to cheat on you like everyone else in this game.
Yeah,
but yeah.
Doesn't make me sense.
Anyway, Schizo, like, basically through a long series of events, it basically tries to turn you into the Rippers to like keep peace at the camp.
That's
so like you end up bailing out.
Schizo wants to fight the Rippers,
right? But he's using that as a front, basically.
So the Carlos and Iron Mike are trying to hash out like a peace treaty, but Schizo wants to beat their ass.
Kind of.
So he's like, he wants an excuse to kill them, but he uses everything else as a guise of like, oh, I'm trying to protect the camp.
Right.
He just wants to like blast them. So he kind of does all these things that turn you in and basically like frame you.
Yeah, he basically like sets you up to get trade swap you for like
because he knows Carlos wants to, yeah.
Right. So you get out, you get back to Iron Mike's camp. You're like, yo, Schizo betrayed me. The Iron Mike, being a pacifist of killing Schizo, lets him go. Out of the many coincidences in this game.
And it's funny, the line he says is, I prevented another death.
Yes.
Yep.
Which,
about that.
There's so many coincidences in this game, which I found hilarious.
I let Schizo go because it wasn't, that one death wasn't going to be on my hands.
But the important things we didn't touch about the militia really quick is that they're run by a general guy who's like a crazy religious zealot.
Like, crazy
he's hypocritical because he doesn't even know the scripture. So it's like
you don't need to know the scripture in the apocalypse, bro.
But whatever, that's a whole other thing I don't even want to get into. And Schizo, like once you decide, you and Sarah finally kind of make amends after you start getting your lab equipment and doing jobs for her. She like decides
you get snowed in and then you fuck and everything's fine. It's a perfectly healthy couple, guys.
You just bust your nut out and you're like, all right, we're good.
Like, God, that was good. That's all I needed. Just fuck the crazy out of me. Like,
so
thank you.
Once you guys decide to kind of bail out, you happen to be making your escape and you got O'Brien working for you to help bail you out. Schizo's being freshly recruited in another amazing coincidence of timing. Comes around the corner as he's like, yo, this the motherfucker that betrayed us all and shit. And like shit goes down and you end up getting like captured with Sarah Schizo ends up being
Schizo
promoted to
frames you
captain,
as like some kind of
instantaneously.
crazy rapist
'Cause he's like,
sinner.
because he's got a tattoo in the back of
demons
the
on
dog.
his back.
Yeah.
He's over a girl
hilarious.
raping her, so they're take your shirt off to prove it. So like they take your shirt off, and naturally you have your motorcycle gang tattoos. So they're like, he's clearly not lying. Like whatever, because like Schizo looks super trustworthy.
He's new, which is funny because like prior to this happening, the only doctor in the camp got murdered by a new recruit who wanted drugs and accidentally killed him.
Also, the general's
So the
general's
general
fucking him too on the side.
The general the whole time after this happened is like, trust no one. Everyone needs to be vetted when they come in here. I don't trust like anything anybody says. And we're going to be extremely harsh on who is allowed in this camp. And then Schizo immediately, first recruit, captain.
Yeah. So like
he trusts him. He's like, he's got a Cerberus tattoo on his back, and he goes, Cerberus, the dog of the guardian of hell, the sinner. And so like now Schizo is in his good graces and takes over the captain role that the doctor
God,
but you get back to the camp and like you can end up, you're like, we're gonna bail Sarah out, and you end up like saving the day to like wrap this up because we're already like 40 minutes into the story. But
Dude.
like
I remember
we're
this
40
game,
minutes into this podcast.
Yeah.
I remember this game being a mess, but holy shit, going over it again. Woo!
So like there's stuff we're probably gonna miss. Like, oh yeah, but yeah, because it's
that was the 40-minute abridged version.
80% of it's irrelevant. What you need to know is Deacon's looking for his wife. You meet O'Brien, who's a scientist, finds out she's alive. You hanging out with the homies at the camp. You get betrayed at the camp. You join the militia. Schizo reappears. You blow it up and save the day.
Here it is. Act 1, Rippers want to kill you. You flood them, kill them all. Act 2, the militia wants to kill you. You blow them up with a fertilizer dump truck bomb.
Yeah.
You just basically wipe out both
Pretty
camps.
much.
Before we move on, though, I want to talk about the one thing that we have not touched on.
I'm sure there's more than one, but what?
Are the zombies.
Yeah.
The freakers.
We haven't talked about them.
Which is all right, yeah.
Honestly,
they have no relevancy. They have no relevancy of this game other than just being a plot setting for it being post-apocalyptic.
They were one of the balls that the manatees chose.
Secondly, this game was marketed very heavily on the hordes.
Definitely.
And you don't really get to interact or do anything with the horde until what? 20? What'd you say? 20, 25 hours?
Last 8 hours of the game.
Like literally, there's only
6.
yeah, seriously. And that's the thing. Like we'll get to it more in the gameplay, but it's the coolest part of the game, and it's what separates this game from every other open world zombie game. But they're not even a factor because the guy that wants to work on destroying the zombies versus your wife who wants to save them is like, try this napalm. So you literally have to fight a horde with this napalm. And that's the first time you get to experience the story-based hordes where the good ones are in the story.
So the story hordes you don't get until later.
Very, very late.
The outbreak of this entire thing is explained as basically a whistleblower inside of that company who sees all these files and sees what they basically shut down the lab and said nobody gets in. Yeah. Sarah's lab. Sarah's like, I don't know what they did with my lab or my research. Turns out they used it to make a biological weapon.
Surprise.
Whistleblower goes in there to try and expose the truth. He infects himself on accident and then goes to a conference in Washington or something. And so when he is sick and infected, he infects everybody at that conference, which I'm assuming with an airborne virus. Because how else would you infect all those people? I don't...
They didn't ever really explain.
So they don't explain...
They only had one spoon for the hors d'oeuvres, and they're like, sure.
They don't explain how it's really spread. So the way that it's explained in the game makes me think airborne. Or touch, maybe. Was it touch?
Maybe, but like you get caught up by these boys and you're fine. So.
Maybe touch, but like who would he have touched at a conference? So I'm going to assume airborne.
I guess you have to.
So then...
and it's interspecies, like animals can catch it.
It's interspecies, so we're going to go airborne virus, which means why isn't everybody infected? Yep. Because you have to fight so many freakers, you get touched by so many of them, you get bit by them multiple times, and there's no question on, am I infected? There's no question on, is that guy infected?
Well, to the
Are they going to infect us?
Well, the Neuro guys are, like you said, they're suited up like ET style. Where
completely
it's like,
suited up.
Can't let the air get into our bodies.
They're basically talking about, they've seen 12 mutations so far, and let's not mention the fact that at the very, very end, O'Brien and his entire team are mutant freakers that are intelligent and like have sentience.
So they don't... Yeah, it's like a secret ending that they don't really touch on, but...
So the zombies like aren't explained how they function. They're just kind of thrown in as a setting device. This game really isn't about a zombie apocalypse, but it wants to be because it's Sarah's whole thing about she caused it. She needs to make a cure, and you got to go capture this little kid version of a zombie or whatever. So they can't commit to what they want to do with this game. They can't commit to the storyline with the Rippers. They can't commit to the militia. They can't commit to Iron Mike or like whatever happened to what's her face at the work camp.
Oh, she kind of just goes away.
There's a whole side story about how you find this girl who's been living on her own.
There's a secret ending with that. Yeah, Lisa.
Let me continue. Yeah. There's this whole thing about this girl who's found, and she's like, if there's any refugees, bring them to my camp, and as long as you work, you get fed. Which, what, on the surface sounds great, but they work you like a fucking slave, and you cannot leave this camp. And that's just fine. We're just going to leave that in the world. We're not going to go talk about that at all. Yeah. Copeland basically is a big old nothing other than a place for you to work on your bike.
Right. Initially, until you get to Iron Mike's camp, it becomes irrelevant.
So it's like the camps are a whole bunch of nothing.
Yeah.
The zombies are a whole bunch of nothing because they aren't really like an actual plot point of any kind.
Yeah, they just kind of exist.
And they use them as fast travel lockouts.
The manatees have spoken, goddammit. Like, there's going to be zombies.
They're just like, let's make zombie nests, and we can't fast travel until you clear them out.
Yep.
That's all it's for.
Yeah.
And
almost
then
randomly attack you every once in a while.
And then at the end, like, Sarah still doesn't find a cure. And we're just everybody's like, okay, happy. So what happened to the hordes that hibernate during the day and they sleep in caves or something?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Like, what's going on with that?
It just ends.
Absolutely nothing.
You just ride off on the Sunset Road and it ends. This game's
absolutely nothing.
Look, I do sound like I'm being very critical of the story because it deserves it, quite frankly. It's 3 stories in one that they tried to make work, and none of it really does, truthfully. Even to the point of like the way the characters interact with you. It's my biggest annoyance is like every character's got beef with you. The most glaring example is Iron Mike, where he's literally the same conversation. He's like, don't ever come back if I show you how to go north. And then literally as you're getting ready to exit, he's like,
what is he going to do? He's a pacifist.
A lot of people need help if you want to stay. Like, what?
Like when you go back to the camp, Ricky's like, Iron Mike's going to kill you. You're coming back here, right? And then you get back there and Iron Mike's like, hey, bud, you want to do some jobs for me?
Right.
But it's not even just him.
I don't kill people.
Like, even Boozer, the way he interacts with you, he's like giving you shit the whole game for like holding out hope to the point where it has like a they live fight style with your best friend. And then they're just laughing it off, like, we just saw all these dogs get murdered, but we're buds. Like, boys are going to tussle.
That one, he was basically projecting his own feelings because his wife was murdered too. So he's like, I got rid of it. You need to get rid of it too. That one, like, made a little more sense than the rest of them. But there's so many characters in this game that just, like,
none of them are likable
on you. No, everyone's kind of an a-hole. Like, the lieutenant dude you first meet in the militia would end up being okay.
Copeland?
No, the actual militia.
Yeah.
I don't remember his damn name.
The one that escapes.
One that has your ring.
The black captain?
Yes.
I don't remember what his name is.
He ends up being like the only redeeming decent character, and Deacon kind of to a degree, but like there's so many times where one character starts treating you one way and then like just flip and then just flip back and you're like
Ricky.
It's fine. Yeah. It's fine
she's
for
just like, oh yeah, I'm gonna fuck you now.
It's fine for the entire cast of a game to be a bunch of assholes.
Right.
But none of them have any kind of character depth in them for me to like their character or their writing. There's just nothing about these characters that makes me be like, man, that was really good writing.
Right. I will say for every good moment in the game, like Nate's talking about the dog, it's really heartbreaking. Like there's one that you find it still alive and Boozer's like, I can't do it, man. Like, please, you got to put the poor thing out of its misery. Like that was really gut wrenching. When you first sneak into the Ripper camp and the girl with like her legs cut off and it's like, she's going to get torn to shreds unless you kill her. Like that was like, oh damn, dude, this world sucks. For every good moment like that, there's 330,864,000,000, 6.5 trillion moments of like, what the fuck is this shit? It's so inconsistent. It's crazy.
This is going to sound like the most unorganized like description of a story we've ever had in this podcast. I don't see how we could top it. I'm really sorry that it seems like we're just all kind of having to fill in, but
it fits the game so well.
I played this game last and I was a little like, how are we going to sit there and talk about this story? It's so scattered and insane. Like,
well, I do say we need to move on because we're almost an hour in.
Right.
But
Jesus Christ.
I will put a link in the Discord of the video, the 9.5 video hour I watched of all of the cutscenes. Truth be told, I didn't play this game. I played about 5 hours and said, I've played what I need to play and watched a 9.5 hour video. So if you're curious about the story, I'll link it.
I 100%ed it because I hate myself.
Same.
I will say, I want to end on a good note. There's a couple things I do like. I like how it's an interesting take on zombies or infected, that they do make nests. That's truly an original idea. I do respect that. It was unique and interesting that they like hunker down in the day and they come out at night. And also, it's set in the game they kind of have like a resemblance of human still, so it kind of adds to like them.
Because they start taking jewelry and stuff.
Right.
Yeah.
That was cool. And then the way it handled the kids, like there's infected kids, the newts, those were creepy as fuck.
Awesome.
And that was cool because every other medium for horror stays away from like kids, but you gotta smoke them and shit. Like this world is kind of like
the animals being infected was cool.
Yeah, there is some good things in it. It's just nothing's executed.
They don't touch on any of the good stuff, but
everything's
there's no link.
Nope.
Everything's the manatee's spoken. The manatee's spoken.
Like,
what about the manatees?
Imagine a developer studio had a potluck of ideas and said, whatever you guys bring, we're going to put it in there one way or the other.
Yep, we'll figure it out.
For our non-South Park viewers, that's a better analogy. Yes.
Yeah.
But yeah, 3 stories in the one. It's a fucking mess, and it's truly the biggest. As you can tell, look how much time we spent. This is one of the most jumbled, non-great stories I've ever ending on a positive note.
Insane that someone spent money to get movie rights for this.
Yep, but let's move on to the gameplay. We have to. The gameplay. I'm going to equate it to the story. The highs are high and the lows are low. I think this game tried to bite off a lot more than it could chew. And some of the things that it does do well, I think it does really well. But the things that it doesn't, could have used more time in the oven. What was your thoughts overall, Nate?
Moment to moment, I feel like it was okay. I didn't hate the design of like having to travel to like what mission you wanted to do at any time. I thought the actual menus, as far as like crafting and selecting your weapon, were a bit tedious and messy.
I had to push so many buttons.
Yeah, and hold stuff while you're flicking and like there's no reason it could have been that messy. You could have just paused your game and crafted stuff. I don't know. I get it slowed stuff down anyway, so it wasn't like it was real time. But the actual gunplay was smooth. The actual like movement wasn't super clunky. Once you upgraded your bike, it helped. But initially, your bike was rough. I think you said it best, man. It's kind of, there were some really good moments in it as far as gameplay wise. I felt very feels like a Sony game that we expect, and there's some where it's like, this could use more time to bake.
One thing I do appreciate, I think we touched on it a little bit in the story, how it's kind of like the way the story is told. You stumble on a lot of things, right? For an open world game, it's not like a Ubisoft game where you climb a tower and the camera spins and there's a bunch of dots that appear. Mm-hmm. I do appreciate how it's like you'll just be on the road and it's like, oh, here's a nest activity, or here's an injured civilian. You stumble across a lot of the side quest. And for me, like I'm kind of over clearing dots in games, so I think it was a kind of refreshing approach to it. And I think they did a good job with that. I don't feel like there was too many activities. They were kind of repetitive because they were kind of the same. But there was like 3 or 4 different ones. It reminded me of like Spider-Man 2, the way it handled it, honestly. There were some that got repetitive, but there wasn't like 100 of the same ones over and over to clear the map. So I do appreciate that design choice, honestly.
The one beef I will say as far as how the story was given to you, there'd be times you'd finish all your missions, you're waiting for something else to pop up, and you have to call it in on the radio to have like a conversation.
Yep. If
you were sniped off your motorcycle, attacked, it would like restart the dialogue. And there's like 3 or 4 of them I heard 6 or 7 times because shit would keep happening. I'm like, so I just park my bike. I'm like, all right, talk so I can start moving on.
There's a very known glitch in the game where it's like Deacon will start talking about something that hasn't happened yet. And then after he finishes, you get called and then the dialogue starts over again. And it's been like that since day one.
Did you guys ever have him talking at the same time where he's talking to someone else?
Yes.
Where it was overlaying, like he would be responding to something in the environment and then a call would come through and he would still keep talking about whatever he saw in the environment and then talking. So it was just like 2 or 3 voices overlaying each other and I couldn't understand what was happening because it's like the game didn't initiate like, oh, a call's coming through, let's cut off the previous dialogue and then let the new dialogue. They just said, let's run it all. Mm-hmm. Run it all. So I'm just like...
Well, they did that, and then sometimes like be driving and a wolf would jump off and maul me on my bike, I'd stab it and be like, you were saying? And it was just continue where it was, and I was like, what?
Yep. Another one of my biggest gripes for this game, for being an action game and like having guns be your main focus, like the combat was really, really, really easy. you literally just, you get by with a melee weapon, rolling a lot, using your slow-mo, timing up headshots, shooting humans if you were fighting humans. There wasn't a lot of like
variety.
That's the thing. There was a ton of variety. The weapons, I think, were great. Like, there's so many options.
I mean,
but the
enemies.
actual combat itself, it's an open world action game hidden as a stealth game, because you could literally just, there was no incentive not to just stealth everything. And honestly, a detriment to the collector's editions, you get this crossbow. It's like military grade. It breaks the game. It's unstoppable. Like, I would just clear out every fucking camp, every little mini horde, just headshot with this crossbow, to the point where I was like, why the fuck would I even invest in guns unless I'm fighting a horde? That was a big disappointment for me. Like, I do think the gunplay and like how frantic it is when you do go loud, it's nice. Because even like when you're aiming down sights, like there's a bunch of recoil. If you're getting shot at, your character like doesn't have like super smooth Call of Duty right down the middle aim. It's very cinematic when you're in a gunfight, kind of like Uncharted almost.
I thought for a third person game, like that's not a shooting game. Like the gunplay was great in this. All the weapons have like different feels to them.
Yeah.
There's upgrades and stuff you can buy to kind of make it a little easier. And once you're like kitted out, it turns into like a shooting gallery. Yeah. But the cover system was not horrible, but it wasn't Gears of War good. Right. It was like sometimes you try to crouch behind something, and I just be taking bullets because you wouldn't take cover properly. It goes back to the controls. The controls are just a little messy in this game.
Yeah, I agree.
I thought it felt fine when you could get stuff working, but there were so many times where I tried to switch to a different weapon and you actually pull out a grenade and throw a grenade. I'm trying to beat your ass with a club. Like, why is the grenade out?
I will say, just for it to be so polished and stuff when you do go loud, but like, what's the point? You can literally just hit headshots with this crossbow. Enemies are stupid too. You can walk right up to them and Walking Dead them in the head with a knife. Like, clearly inspired by Walking Dead, all the knife head stabs. There's no point in going loud. It's unfortunate because I think it does play much better when you do go loud than it is a stealth game. But even like the bodies, they don't react to dead bodies very well. They're just kind of like, oh, this guy's dead. Shit, that's not good. Find them. And then they're still idiots. It's a stealth game hidden as an open world game where you go to these big open points and then it turns into a little stealth playground. It's a fair criticism, and I feel like it's something, if it had more time in the oven, it could have been polished better to where it's like, hey, let's not make you play stealth, especially from a studio that's known for stealth. Like, you're trying to make something different, a new IP. Don't fall back on your crutch,
Let's talk about these motorcycles really quick.
Yeah, I was going to say, let's talk about the bikes because it's a huge part of the game. I'm just waiting for a moment
to talk.
There's a lot to talk about this game, man. What you got, Barry?
I'll just list a list. I'm only going to say my discrepancies because, to be honest, I did not like this game. There is nothing in this game that makes me want to go back and play it. For one, it doesn't make sense to be a stealth game and have a loud motorcycle. It doesn't make any sense at all. You're telling me to ride this loud ass motorcycle around zombies that listen.
Yeah.
And you're supposed to be quiet so they don't catch you.
Oh, but not just you. Everybody rides a fucking motorcycle for some reason.
Two, if you're going to make a open world game and tackle fast travel and tackle any kind of mode of transportation that's not walking, it needs to make sense. Mm-hmm. That's why every single open world game, it's a horse, man. It's a horse. There's not a lot. I mean, there is a lot that are like cars, but why does my motorcycle go through an entire tank of gas in less than a kilometer? Like, do you guys understand how much how much that is? Like, in real life, motorcycles can get like 50 miles to a gallon.
Yeah.
To a gallon. And their tanks are small. It's not like a 12 gallon tank that a normal car's got. But it's 50 miles to a gallon. So why in less than 1 kilometer do I have to stop at a gas station and refuel? It's like the parallel is taking Assassin's Creed Odyssey, right? Where you ride around on a horse and you have to stop at a town and feed your horse hay. Yeah. Otherwise it doesn't want to go anywhere. It doesn't make any sense. So for them to be heavily relying on motorcycles, for them to just be something I don't even want to be on, makes no sense. Two, I love open world games. I love map clearing. It's my OCD brain loves to see the little dots. I can understand why people don't like it, but I'm just like, I see a dot and I want to go to it. When I don't see, I don't want to explore. So on that flip side of this game, it doesn't give you all those points on the map because it wants you to go and explore, but it gives me no reason to go and explore. Does that make sense?
And there's no incentive to go exploring anything.
There's nothing in this game that makes me want to go anywhere except for my objective, because it's proven time and time again that there's no reward for any of that.
It's really fair.
I didn't have a problem with the combat. I thought it was fine. It was challenging where it needed to be, especially when you went melee and they got too close. You were like, oh man, they could kick my ass. But there wasn't any reason to use any other thing than one gun, one melee, and a Molotov. Mm-hmm. The utilities were useless.
Unless you're fighting a horde, yeah.
Other than that, like, what was the point of me having to hold a bumper and then, like, hold my little analog stick to the upper left and then hold another bumper to open up another crafting menu and then hold square to craft it while I'm paused in combat? It was just uncomfortable.
Very.
Like, if you were just going to give me a slow-mo pause menu to craft stuff, just let me hit the pause button.
Right.
I don't know what they were trying to do with that. Doesn't make any sense. So I was just like crafting Molotovs. I didn't want to touch anything else. Mm-hmm. And I played the game fine. And because there's no enemy variety, it doesn't encourage me to use other weapons.
Mm-hmm. I think that's a problem because there is enemy variety, but again, you only start seeing them with 10 hours left in the game.
Towards the end.
We've got humanoids that can shoot me. You've got humanoids that bite me, and you've got wolves, and then like 2 bears in the whole game.
There's a lot of mountain lions. There's the crows. Like, that's the thing. It's all locked within the last 10 hours.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like at the end, it does open up a lot more, but.
So by that time, like, I've had and I'm guessing that's where it wanted us to explore this tiny map with nothing in it to, like, use some other weapons. But I'm just like, there's no reason for me to use all these other weapons. If I have to headshot everything, why am I using a shotgun?
Yeah. Right.
It doesn't make any sense.
And even, like, fighting the hordes, like, once you get the heavy machine gun, why the fuck would I use anything else?
No.
You know what I'm saying? So it's like, it's great there is a large number of weapons, but for what reason? Because once you get what you need for fighting the enemy type, there's no point.
It wanted to be an open world, but it couldn't commit to it.
Yep.
And it wanted to tell a linear story and give you a linear path, but it couldn't commit to it. It's trying to mesh too many things that don't make sense.
Yeah.
And it's a charcuterie board of whatever people decided to bring to this game. And they're like, okay, well, how do we do crafting during combat? Okay, well, let's give you the option to craft all of the throwables all at once. If you're just gonna Elder Scrolls it and let me eat in a menu and craft in a menu, then just let me do that. Yeah. Why are we doing a recticle? That doesn't make any sense.
I love this charcuterie board analogy, but somebody ate all the cheese is the problem with this game.
And you're left with the crackers.
Right.
Yeah. And there's no cheese to pair with the crackers.
Just a note on the crafting thing. I played on the PS5, and I so many accidental times pushed the damn big button in the middle of the PS5 controller where it's like the touchpad, which opens up your skill menu while I was trying to craft. And, like,
well, the PS4 controller has a touchpad.
It's not as big. My thumb kept hitting the PS5.
I had the same issue, honestly.
I kept opening the damn skill menu when I was trying to craft.
No, I didn't have that problem. Yeah. But I can see, like, even then, it was
such a messy menu anyway, it didn't matter, honestly.
I had to, like, hold the controller a certain way if I was trying to craft to make sure I didn't accidentally push a button.
I was about to say, if you got bigger hands, I can see that being a problem, but your hands are smaller than mine.
Yeah.
They're not tiny.
They're technically smaller.
They're smaller than yours. You got big ass hands. Yeah, I got long fingers, though.
You guys are just used to the Xbox feel.
Yeah, I hate this.
I'm a PlayStation controller pro.
Yeah, that's probably what it really is, honestly.
That off-center holding. Yeah, I can see.
Honestly, I think that's a really good point.
Probably what it was. Is your asymmetrical.
It was struggle bus.
So that's what's frustrating about this game too, though. For, like, every frustrating thing you were talking about, there is cool shit. How, like, the day and night cycle actually affects gameplay. Where it's like there's more horde, there's more zombies at night, freakers, at night.
I felt like the stealth felt really good.
Yeah.
I wanted to stealth more than anything. I didn't really want to do big gunfights.
And they should have advertised it as a stealth game. Mm-hmm. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's a stealth game hidden in an open world action game. Unless you're fighting the hordes, like, I think the hordes hands down are the coolest thing about this game. The problem is I think there's like 40 hordes in the game, right? There's something like that. There's
30, 20.
There's a lot of hordes, but again, we've talked about in a story. You don't fight the story-based hordes, and that's where these, like, made environments are to fight them. Where, like, you're basically running through a lumber mill, you gotta throw logs down to slow them down. They're highlighted inside these structured worlds that the devs made for them. And it's a bad representation because those 3 fights are the best fights for the hordes. And the rest of the time, it's like, go in this cave. They're all bundled in this cave, so you just throw dynamite in there and kill them all. Mm-hmm. It's like you stealth your way into the cave. You see them all chewing meat.
And then when you run out of dynamite, you go ahead and craft some more in your menu.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So it's like you get this really cool, like, oh my god, that fight was... Dude, the wood mill, that fight was amazing. Like, I'm not afraid to say it. If that game would have been like, we have to go to these points and clear out these hordes. Like, this game would have been so much more fun. It probably would have got long in the tooth, but like the coolest part is how like, man, this just, I know there's a horde mode they released for DLC. Like, I should have played that because that's where the fun was. The coolest part was like I was on top of this roof just mowing them down, throwing bombs, and then they started like climbing each other to get to you, and it was like, how do I stop this? What the fuck? Like, you have to keep moving, you have to keep going, and it's like you have a stamina meter, so you have to pay attention. There is some strategy to it. You can't just keep dumping lead, and that's the thing. Like, it's inspired by World War Z, but if you guys ever played that game, you just get like armor and miniguns, and you just mow them down. It's not the same. Like this, there's some strategy in it. You gotta like find choke points. Because they're almost like water. Like, they will fill every little gap and they will come over. Mm. It was really cool, and the tech was really impressive, honestly.
It never like hiccuped, and it'd be like
600.
The first horde you fight for the story is like 600 enemies, and it doesn't slow down at all. It's seamless. Like,
I will say, the last bit that I'm gonna say about this, it was optimized well. Then again, I was playing on a PS5, so it's gonna run better. And then I think that I wish they would have pushed a little bit more into the horror aspects of it. Because the segment where you have to go into the caves to get... you have to go into these caves with Schizo to get some kind of dynamite or whatever.
The detonators.
Yeah, the detonators. And you had to go into that cave and you get separated at one point. And then he's like, don't shoot anything. You're going to attract them all. And so now you're in this cave and it's dark as piss.
Yeah, that was awesome. Yeah.
It's dark as piss and all you have are flares, but someone keeps moving your flares and you're getting lost. And I'm like, this is kind of spooky. I'm like, this is like primetime horror. I'm inside of a zombie game and I don't want to die in these caves. And it felt really good. But that was one small blip on the rest of what the story did. That was it. There was no other instances of like thematically scary moments. It was all just like action, action, action. None of it was like kind of terrifying.
I agree.
And so I wish they would have done more lent. I wish they leaned more. I wish they leaned more into that horror. Because I mean that's where I was really impressed by some of the level design. I was like, this is good.
That was a good scene.
And you know, I was watching and I didn't play the game at this point, but I would have stopped playing that game at that point. I would have been like, no, I'm not doing this because I don't do well with it.
Because you hear the gunshot in the distance and you're like, oh fuck, like here they come, and you have to like haul ass back. Yeah, that was a great scene.
There's a couple scenes where like when it was shrunken down and built into like the scene when you escape from the Ripper camp was pretty gnarly too. When there's like people being tortured all around you and you're like, should I save them? Or do I need to get the hell out? The set designs when they were small scope, handcrafted, like not trying to be open world, were like a lot better than the open world that they made for sure.
Same deal. They wanted to commit to telling a story, but they couldn't commit to telling a story because they wanted you to do it too.
It perfectly describes the game, honestly, where it's like the highs are high and the lows are, and the mediums are low, honestly.
That's the rest I gotta say.
Yeah, it's a frustrating game because of exactly what you're speaking of, Barry. Like, the highs really are great. It's even the bike, like I think conceptually it's kind of a weird thing where it's like this Harley that's off-road, and like, why does everyone ride bikes? It's a whole nother thing, but like, again, the bike doesn't become marginally controllable or fun until the end of the game. Or when you're doing combat on the bike, I thought the combat on the bike was actually really cool. Like, there's backbones for a Twisted Metal game.
It's a good thing everybody else rides a bike.
Yeah, exactly.
So you can do bike chases and stuff.
For every like cool design choice or every positive of this game, there's a million negatives, and that's the most frustrating part. How about glitches really quick? Do you guys have any glitches? This game's like heavily criticized at launch, partially because of performance.
Not in the time frame that I played, not that I know of.
That's good.
I had a bunch.
A bunch?
Yeah, I had, obviously Barry brought up the one talking over. I had that one.
Oh, I guess other than that, but
I had a couple where my bike was like crashed, or like an ambush camp attacked me, or I'd kill them all. My bike would be like just spinning in a rock somewhere. So I had to go back. I had to fast travel to camp and pay to get my bike dug out because like it was just stuck in something. I had one where most of them were my bike. I had one where I was trying to get back into Iron Mike's camp, and it's kind of got a tiny little lake under a drawbridge type of thing. And I was over the bridge. My bike fell through the bridge. My guy stayed on his bike. So I was at the gate, and it wouldn't let me in.
Defianced it?
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Like, I got into the camp without my bike, but then I went to go fill up my gas, and they were like, you have to retrieve your bike for, $50. And I'm like, it's literally right in the entrance. Like, what do you mean? And I'm technically still on it. So I had a couple. It wasn't enough to like ruin my gameplay experience, but they were noticeable for sure.
Yeah, I only had a couple, but mine was where the point where I had to back out and load my save. Just it would not advance the story, and it was frustrating. The only other really bad one I had was I was in a cave sneaking up on a horde, and like I set the bombs down, I triggered him, I was running, and my guy was just like falling, but he wasn't in a T-pose, but it was like you jumped off a cliff, so his leg was down.
Yeah, I guess I did get one where he got stuck on a wall on a glitch, and it seemed like he kept like short cliff falling, and I was like, why am I...
Did you live or did you just die?
He eventually popped out of it. Oh, I remember.
I just died.
It was in the middle of one of those Nero missions where you had to follow a scientist close enough in the cave to hear her, but like not trigger anything. So I got stuck on the wall, and he was like T-pose, like falling as she was coming around the side. I said, "Oh God, please let me out of this so I can hide." And I ended up doing it, but anyways,
it's funny. So if you go back and look at the reviews of this game, most of the poor scoring is because of glitches and things, and it's like they're still there, but it's not to the point where it was. But we're just gonna ignore the fucking horrible story and the mess of whatever. It's just funny the things that get criticized, but I don't know, man. There are some fun moments with the open world, but overall, it's a miss. Let's move on to graphics. As far as the graphics go, I play this on PS5. It runs great on PS5. It's super smooth, even if there's a million enemies on the screen. I know it's 30 frames a second on PlayStation. Obviously, PC is based on your PC. But I was really impressed for Ben to be working on the PSP and the Vita for so long, and to have like a lofty next-gen at the time game for their first project. Like, kudos to them, man. It's a beautiful looking game, honestly.
Environments are really nice. Lighting was really nice. Like, probably one of the stronger points of this game is the graphics, honestly.
I was about to say, I think this is the strongest point, hands down.
I agree. Yeah.
I think there's a couple times in character models, like the parts of your face that move, like your jaw and your eyelids, that people would get like weird looking everyone's with like a weird underbite or overbite. But overall, it wasn't terrible. Like the models for the environment and like the grass moving and the wind and stuff, that made up for it, in my opinion.
I think the character models were super solid. Like you can see pores and shit on PC. Like it's so detailed.
Their actual graphics was really good, though.
The face scans, the actors look like the actors.
Yeah, the textures were amazing. The environment textures were amazing. I can see what Nate is saying about some of the character models, and I agree, but they weren't to that point where I was like, ew, I don't want to look at you.
They weren't
It was just one of those things where it was like, it's not right quite there. The lighting was fantastic. I thought, for a game so focused on motorcycles that did so many things wrong, they were very specific about making you ride the motorcycle correctly, which I thought was super cool. So I didn't notice it on a downshift, but when you would be riding and you would shift gears, you could see his left foot move to change the gear. And I was also trying to see if I could swivel the camera in a way where I could see if he was going to grab the clutch to switch it as well, because you have to do the foot and the clutch at the same time. I couldn't tell on the left hand, but like you could hear it. It would rev up and then you'd switch gears and you'd see his little foot move over and change the gears. Yeah. But then, like, when you abruptly stopped or you slowed down, I can't remember if it downshifted too. But he definitely shifted up. Yeah. Which I thought was, like, a really specific detail that they didn't need to put in. But it was like, okay, you guys are paying attention to, like, how it functions. Right. It's pretty cool. And, I mean, the foot animation moving was kind of wild, but it's like he sucked his entire foot into the engine. But I just thought that was a really interesting detail. But overall, I think graphically this game looked fantastic. Yeah. It was really good.
The animations were stellar. Even some of the guns, like when you're loading an AK, like anyone who's actually loaded one, you have to rock the mag in. He actually rocks the mag in instead of an AR. He just pushes it straight up. There's so many small details. Even like if you look up in the sky and you see birds circling, there's a horde there. There's so many cool little things in the graphics. It's hands down the best part of this game. Or even when you're going through the woods and you see like the sun shooting through the trees for like the God particles, looks amazing. The water reflections on the road after it rains, like the weather's really dynamic.
Footprints in the snow.
Yeah, your bike trail in the snow. Like you could go across the map and come back and you still have a trail in the snow.
Yeah, I think Nate touched on it, but the level design when they were in those handcrafted areas were really, it was very good. Like that cave I was talking about, fantastic. Yep. When the dam, when you have to go through and like bust the dam or go in there the first time and like turn the electricity back on, the places where they want you to go and tell the specific story or they make for that are fantastic. The rest of it's just meh. same, grass and dirt roads and whatever.
I will say, I thought the foliage was really nice. Like, it moved realistically. It wasn't just like, oh, look, it's moving left to right. Like, it looked really, really, some of the best foliage I've seen since, like, Far Cry. Like, I think stellar graphics in this game. I can't praise the graphics enough. I wish the rest of the game got this much polish, honestly. Like, it's really disappointing. Like, you can tell they spent a lot of time on trying to pump out the PS4, and I feel like it does push. I kept forgetting it's a PS4 game.
I consider this like an end of life cycle PS4 game.
For sure. I kept forgetting it was a PS4 game. I'm like, this looks really pretty. Never had frame drops. The only kind of weird graphical glitch I had a weird like Bethesda moment where I shot a guy and he got like dead, but he was like standing there. And there's weird shit with elevation sometimes where it's like he was like going up on a rock, so he was kind of like rising, like ascending into heaven, but he was standing there dead.
Had a couple,
but it wasn't common, I will say.
Yeah, it wasn't super common. It's as many people as you kill. It only happened to like 2 or 3 for me.
My only other negatives, some of the gun models looked kind of shitty. Like the pistol.
Oh, they were terrible.
Yeah. The pistol specifically.
Yeah.
The very first one you're holding, and it's like just literally a brick on a stick, and it's like...
It looks like a high point. Yeah.
What?
It's like, what the hell?
That's what's weird, because the rifles looked great.
Bro, it's the Nintendo Labo if it made a gun.
Yeah, the Desert Eagle didn't look out of place, which is just weird. It's like the normal standard 9mm pistol was like gigantic.
Yeah.
My Deacon got little hands.
Yeah. Well, that's what's funny. Even on the statue, it kind of looks like it, but not as bad in the game. It just... Yeah, that's the biggest negative. Other than that, I don't have a lot of negatives about the graphics at all. Like, hands down, the best part of the game. No questions asked.
For sure.
Like, honestly, some of the best graphics I've seen in modern gaming, like, overall for everything. No bad textures, like, A+, 100%. And that's what we're going to spend the shortest amount of time, unfortunately. Sound and music. What do you guys think of the voice acting?
Highlight. Another highlight. I think the sound. I think the graphics and the sound are the 2 high points for me.
100% agree.
The line delivery and dialogue was really good. I think the voice actors did a really good job. You can't fault them for a bad script.
Exactly.
So while the script is poor, I think the delivery of a lot of things that happened in that game were exceptional. And the one that I go to is your first confrontation with O'Brien. When you're like, where's my wife? What did you do with my wife? And that dialogue with like, Sam Witwer is like a great voice actor as it is. Like everyone knows him as Star Killer, but he delivered for whatever the director wanted him to do. He did it exceptionally well. Mm-hmm. And O'Brien being such a side character, that's not really like a pivotal moment of like the overall story. Whoever they had, I need to look up who they had for him. Great job. He did a fantastic job on line delivery as well. I think that scene was cinematically very well played. Mm-hmm. Whether or not the script is there, it's not their fault.
Right.
But I think some of the sounds too were good as far as like the environments go or the sounds of the guns. The one flaw though was the levels. Like, and you've talked about it a lot and I'm sure you will. But like when you're stealthing and he's talking to himself, you're being too loud, dog.
Yeah, where he literally sounds like Macho Man. He's like, oh, it's a nest. I can smell it. It stinks. Yeah. Before he started this, I was joking with Nate and he's like, there's no way he sounds like that. And he literally texted me like, bro, you weren't exaggerating or embellishing. I was like, no,
he sounds like it. It sounds just like it.
Well, like you're supposed to be sneaking and you're sitting there like, oh, I smell a nest. Yeah. It's so
and
jarring.
Initially when Brian brought that up, I was like, hey, to me, it feels like that's probably what he's saying in his head, like an internal monologue. Because the whole game, like Deacon's kind of by himself and he talks to himself a lot. And so I kind of always registered it as I was playing as like, these are Deacon's like internal thoughts that he's talking to himself. And then Brian's like, nah, man, his mouth is moving. And I said, what? So I had to go look for it. And like his mouth is moving like while you're sneaking in the bushes around this guy and talking about
it's funny
how smelly
too, because
it is.
like people criticize the shit of this game because like Deacon talks to himself. Like I sympathize so much with this. It's not even funny because I have that same problem. Like I don't think it's a criticism.
I thought it was
like
a great aspect.
Yeah. To me, it humanizes them, right? Like we all know our strengths and weaknesses. You probably shouldn't be yelling when a horde's looking for you, but that's neither here and there. Yeah, I think that all the actors did a great job. And like exactly you're saying, I even had it in my notes, like 100%, it's not the actor's fault with the material they're given. They did the best they could. And I think they all there's nobody that sounds like they just phoned it in.
Mm-hmm.
And then watching the behind the scene making of it, they did the mocap for it also.
Mm-hmm.
And they made him do like 3 or 4 takes per scene in a day. And at first they're like, why? And they're like, because you're being too emotional. Like Deacon's supposed to be just done living at this point. So he had to go back, and everyone says he's kind of like flat. And then as the game goes on, he gets more and more emotional, but it was by design. And I think Deacon's hands down the best character in this game.
It makes sense if you're talking about a character who is like, he has found his reason to live, is finding his wife finally. So it makes sense on why he would try and get more emotional through.
It's surviving versus living is what they were going for, and I think they nailed it. Mm-hmm. But yeah, the gun sounds are fucking amazing in this game.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I'm talking Battlefield level of good. Like, when you have even like you can hear the brass hitting the rocks and shit if you're shooting on a rock environment. There's so many cool little details where they must have really recorded weapons, because like every weapon sounds different. If you're in an enclosed environment, like if you're in a gas station, you shoot a pistol, it's like, pow, and it like rings out, and then you hear the brass hit. Some of the sound design's phenomenal in this game.
It's interesting because I feel like they had to have done multiples of them too, because I remember every time you throw a Molotov and hit something and hear that glass shatter, but I don't feel like the glass shatter was the same every single time. And you hear the glass shatter and the whoosh of the fire. I was like, bless you.
Is it the cat?
Yeah. It's like tiny things that I feel like they paid attention to in the sound design, and I appreciate that. It's like the graphics and the sound had such care put into it that I feel like they were doing that. This game feels like a demo. Mm-hmm. Does that make sense?
Oh yeah.
Like they were like, "Hey guys, we're gonna put out this demo, and it needs to rock. It needs to rock. It needs to look pretty. It needs to sound pretty. The story and the stuff doesn't need to quite be there because it's just a part of the whole. Mm-hmm. But like, we got to put a sweet demo out." And then it kind of stayed a demo.
It's funny.
They were just like, oh, everyone liked it in the state of 10. Just kind of wrap it up and release it, guys.
It's funny because this is like Ben's first new IP, so it makes you wonder if they're just like, let's just show them what we can do so we can get back on console instead of doing handhelds. And then now, funny enough, there isn't going to be a sequel for this game pretty much. It's determined, but they gave Ben a new IP to work on. So maybe it worked. I don't know.
Well, unless it's going to be the same problem as this one. This was a new IP for them to work on.
That's true.
So
Let's get them better script writers.
Yeah. Which is cool for let's talk about the music really quick. They actually brought in like Hollywood people to work on the score. Oh, fuck, I don't have his name in my notes. He's the guy that did the music for The Purge. All right, so the original music of the game's by Nathan Whitehead. He did the music for one of the Purge movies, and that's how they call his attention to the studio. And they're like, we want this guy to work on our game because basically the tones and the way it feels fit that movie perfectly. We need that in this game. So the contrast of like when you're on the bike, you're on the open road, it's very much like Americana. It's very folky. You kind of got like acoustic guitar, Last of Us type of music. But like when you're in the Freaker's Nest, the music's awesome. And he basically was like, I literally took a violin bow and I just started rubbing it across of everything in the studio, every instrument.
I thought it was so atmospheric. Yeah.
It's creepy, dude. And the main one that he had where you basically rubbed the bow against a cymbal and he was like, hey, there's harmony there. So then they made that into a song. And I'm like, that's pretty cool. And that's why it sounds so like creepy and unsettling. I think the music's fantastic in this game. The original music. Let me be clear about that. I don't really care for the, songs they picked out at the end, like the Days Gone at the credits and the intro. It's just not my type of music. I don't think it's bad per se, but it's not something I would be like, let me put that on my Spotify.
So, in Walking Dead, when they had like 6 minutes left of an episode, they had to fill it with like fucking set dressing and like they have a song play. It did that like 3 or 4 times in this game too, where they're like, oh shit, we're going to a new environment. Let's roll out with the Johnny Cash song on a motorcycle and playing the sunset. Like, I hate that. It just feels like cheap storytelling to me when they do that. It's like
trying to be Hollywood.
That's when they said, hey, they like it as is, wrap it up and let's release it. They said ride them off into the sunset and play a song. I don't know,
There's just
man.
so many moments like that where I feel like it's
I thought the original score was fantastic, man. I really did. Like it's so atmospheric and like just the creativity behind it and the parallels between like human side of it and like the freaker side of it. Like not enough good things to say about the sound and the graphics of this game. A+. Like if that's all we did here was review graphics and sound like in the 90s, this game would be a 10. Unfortunately, we don't. But that being said, let's get to the nitty-gritty of our podcast and what separates us from everybody else, the price and collectability aspect of this game. All right. So it looks like a complete box copy of normal Days Gone goes for about $17, give or take. The disc $16, so just get the box, okay, if you want to play it.
Big spender over here.
Right. If you have PSN, you can download it for free and play it. That's how I did, even though I have the collector's edition here. The cover...
is it on their subscription service?
It might be the premium thing. I don't know. I'm on the top 2.
I got it for free 1 month of the PlayStation Plus.
Nice.
That's where I got it from. So I think it's on their...
Is it called premium? I don't remember what it's called.
Whatever the one is that doesn't include the classic catalog, so the middle tier.
Yep.
Because they have all their exclusives basically available on there.
I've got the premium tier because I let Nate borrow my disc, so I don't know. But yeah, it's available for digital and physical. Now, the collector's edition. Let's go over what's in this thing. It has Days Gone game for PS4 system plus custom steelbook. I'm reading the back of the box. Deacon and Bike statue. It is by Gentle Giant. Physical and digital original music. 6 collector's pens. Physical and digital mini art book by Dark Horse Comics. So On patch, trademarked. 4 decals, trademarked. Voucher for DLC content, and that voucher is basically some bike parts and the indestructible crossbow. I don't remember what this retailed for. I want to say it was $120.
That seems low.
I remember it was pretty cheap, but it looks like just the statue itself's going around for $120. Complete in box, you're looking at $160, $175. And I will say, everything in this collector's edition, very quality.
That's a lie.
What do you think's not?
The statue. This is probably one of the worst Gentle Giant statues I've ever seen.
It's weird because I don't love the statue itself, but I think the paint apps on it are really nice. Like the motorcycle's super detailed. It's kind of lazy because it is just the cover of the game. It's my biggest critique with it, but I think it's a nice statue.
I think it looks fine until you touch it and you feel it does not feel like maybe like
because I've got 2 of them, maybe 3. I have to sit here and remember, but like Gentle Giant is like premium, heavy. Hand painted, and this feels like plastic PVC.
I remember like we had to look for the where it said Gentle Giant because
it doesn't even say Gentle Giant on there.
Yeah, right. It is like
it is plastic.
It looks nice until you touch it, and then it feels cheap.
It's molded plastic.
Yeah, the paint apps are really nice on it though. It's really detailed, especially the bike. Like look at the carbon fiber on the front of it. Like it's a very well painted statue.
It's just
the problem is I don't love the statue. I think it's lazy. They just took the cover of the game.
So the bike looks great. The ground and the characters are bad. It's
the ground's not great.
They're like action figures.
It's like they imagine someone painting a miniature and only just putting solid colors on. There's no, I don't know. The paint on the bike is great. I think there's texture and detail there, but then the everything else is just like, oh, we gotta finish it. Hurry up.
Yeah. I will say the steelbook.
I wish it was just the bike.
I'm not a big fan of the steelbook either. It's basically supposed to be like a leather jacket. It's even got a line in it for sewing. Like I appreciate them trying something different. I just think it's kind of ugly. But having a physical copy of the soundtrack, I think that's rad. That's really cool.
The art book is really nice.
Yeah, the art book's super nice. Dark Horse usually makes good shit.
Yeah, they always make good ones.
The decals, we were looking at those because I didn't know there was decals in here, so we were opening it up, looking at it. They're like really thick, nice quality decals instead of stickers, if you will. The pens are like enamel. They're heavy. They actually have a little protector too, so they don't go all the way through and destroy the rest of your collector's edition. The box it comes in is like really thick. It's really heavy.
The box is nice quality.
Yeah. I don't think they took any expense with other than like the paint. I think looking at the statue more, the grass is kind of iffy. But I think the bike's really nice. Deacon looks okay. It's just not my favorite statue, but I think it's good enough for the price point. But now, you're looking at paying $160, $175, and this has kind of stayed steady looking at price charting. It's never really dipped. It's kind of stayed around that $160, $170 mark. I think when we were out and about, that store we went to on our road trip, they had one for $150. But this has kind of stayed steady, and it's interesting because a lot of times the Sony collector's editions, they do. And with the PC port and like the weird like fandom behind this game, I don't know. Let's get into it, boys. Is it worth it? Is it worth it? Now, you got to remember, we're not judging the game on its own. That would be boring. You can spend your $20 however you want. For me, looking at the collector's edition, this is what separates, us hardcores from that. Even if you don't love this game, I don't think this is a crazy buy. They did announce a movie deal for this game, so this might skyrocket once a movie comes out. If we ever do get a sequel for this game, this is going to go up, I think. It's a weird one for all the negative. This game, man. how negative I love for this game. Like, I don't feel comfortable just being like, absolutely not. This is not fucking worth it, because I think there is, from a collectability side, not so much a gameplay side, some merit into this collector's edition. I think there's a real chance for this to kind of go up a little bit. If 2 ever comes out, if this ever becomes a franchise, like, this is probably a nice one to have.
I'm on the opposite line of thinking. I think the best case scenario is this game gets remembered like a Virtual Boy, where it's kind of like a Sony flop.
It's another weird thing, though, because like it didn't flop.
It didn't flop, though.
It didn't financially, but critically, I would say it did.
It sold over 8 million units, and then 2 million on Steam.
I know it sold fairly well. I mean, like,
it sold Ghost of Tsushima numbers is what's crazy. Like, it wasn't a flop. And that's the thing. I guess when they pitched the sequel to Sony, they were like, "Hey, look, it made money. Like, what's the holdup here?" And I guess it was the critical reviews for this game.
I want to agree, but I also feel like a lot of the critical reviews were this game is in an unplayable state kind of critical review, which is the same thing that happened to Cyberpunk.
Yep.
The game was unplayable. Yeah. And I don't think that's completely fair of the rest of the game, because you've got, you know, all of these amazing reviews of the rest of it. Put the glitches aside. If you actually play the game, they're like, oh, the story is one of the best stories ever told. So I'm just like, are we playing the same game?
Yeah, I know. It's
Are we playing the same game? Because, like, what's happening?
It's another reason why I feel like this might be worth it. There is a strong cult following, and they're, like, loyal and deathly defending this game. Like,
I wouldn't even call it a cult following. That's too big to be a cult following.
Like Ripper
cult.
Like,
that's a loud majority. Go read the Steam reviews. It's crazy. It's just like, did we play the same game? What in the world?
Yeah,
so we all three of us pretty much feel the same way about this game.
We were sending each other Steam reviews in Discord, like, look at this shit. Like,
absolutely insane.
I was shocked how high they were. I mean, it's got better reviews than like all-time classics.
Yeah,
it's wild.
Yeah.
Here's my 2 cents about the reviews.
Just like, what kind of juice y'all drinking? Who paid? Is this all paid?
Here's another.
These paid reviews?
Right. Another thing's though, like, I think people automatically turn their thumb down to like a 6.5 or a 7. Like, that's a quote good game. It doesn't mean it's ass. Like, a 4 on down's ass. And you know what? There's nothing wrong with being like a good, solid, middle of the road game.
That's the problem. Okay, here's the problem I have with Steam reviews. You've got 2 options: recommend or not recommend.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's it. And so, based on the numbers of recommends versus not recommends, you'll have overwhelmingly positive, mixed, and poorly received.
Mm-hmm.
There's no scale. There's no scale at all. And then you go, what is this on Metacritic? Because I'm pretty sure it's higher on user reviews for Metacritic.
Yeah, I think you're right.
User reviews are generally
like high.
General reviews are, they're always high for this game. 71%, 8.5 generally favorable user score.
Okay, here we go.
So Metascore 71, user score is 8.5.
So I mean, overall, like on Metascore, it's 52% positive, 34 mixed, and 3% negative.
Yeah.
But I mean, you pair that along with, you know, it's got a 77 on Metacritic, which I think is too high. I think like 7 is a good.
Towards an 80.
7 is a good game. Like a 71, a 7 is a good game where it's like not, you know, world breaking, genre changing kind of game. It's playable. I had a good time playing it. I feel like I got my money's worth out of a 7. This to me is like a 4. To me.
Ooh.
There's nothing in I weigh a narrative-based game very heavy on the narrative aspect.
You kind of have to, right?
If that's what you're pushing this game to be, you had to have one of the best stories I've ever heard.
And they don't.
And they don't. And that's why it's so low for me. I would not recommend this to anybody. I would never play this game again. I think it looks gorgeous. I'm not going to say it doesn't. I think the voice actors did an incredible job. But, like, why is this game loved? I don't understand.
Here's what's crazy. The last 3 user reviews, 10, 9, 10. Like, it's I think 7's fair, honestly. I think there's some polish where it needs to be polished, and there's some work that needs to be done. That's why it's not higher. That being said, like, I don't understand like why this game's so beloved. Like, I think it's a solid game that needed more time in the oven.
I think maybe, I can't remember which one of you just said it, but People look down unfavorably on anything that's not a 9.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's basically 9, 10, or bust. And so when anybody is putting a review up, and that's why it's so heavily skewed on Steam, is you have 2 options.
Right.
And that's why it's so heavily skewed in everywhere else, because everyone has this preconceived notion that, like, you give anything below a 9, and it means it's a trash game.
Yeah.
So they like the game, it's immediately a 9 or a 10. Because if they say it's anything less, then they don't think it's good.
Yeah.
So, and that's how skewed the review system is at this point.
Yeah.
It's the scale doesn't work.
We all pretty much stay away from number reviews at this point, don't we? Like,
it's one of the things that drew me to this game, though, was like, because it's so drastic, like it's either a 10 or it's a fucking 6. Like it's, most games
I do
don't
that
do
too. When I look at games, I'm like, okay, why is the critic review so low and why is the user review so high? Let me see how I feel about this game, which is why I picked one coming up, actually.
Interesting.
But it's just, this one makes absolutely no sense to me.
I agree.
Absolutely no sense, because if you take something so similar, Last of Us, that is a 9, 10 out of 10 game. This comes nowhere near it. So you can't even put them on the same like level at all.
I think you brought up a really good point with narrative driven. Like Last of Us, as far as gameplay, it's not great.
They did a lot better in the second game, but
the story's fantastic though, and it keeps you wanting to play, even though it's probably 7 on gameplay. The story's 11. And it keeps you wanting to get through it. This did not have that.
Like you can do limited things with gameplay and not have, great gun combat and not have super great stealth, but what that game does is it pushes the narrative so aggressively that it wants you to go to the next point, where it's like, okay, I'll get through this little like combat part and then move on and go check out some houses or whatever, but it's so heavily story driven that like it compensates. And then when they, Last of Us 2 came out, they pushed the envelope for gameplay immensely, which made that one just an incredible game all around. This doesn't do that with narrative, but they wanted to push a narrative story so hard. That's why it's a 40-hour game.
It's long. It dragged its toes, too. Like, I was done by the end of it.
I was so ready for this game to be over.
It's funny, because, like, the first 12 hours, I was like, why is everyone showing this game? Like, this is pretty solid. Like, it's just going to get better, right? I was wrong. I was done by the end. For me, though, with this collector's edition, if you're a fan of this game and you don't have the collector's edition, the price has stayed steady. I'd say if you love Days Gone, there's people out there that do. Pick us up. Like this is a cool collector's edition for the fan. It comes with a bunch of shit. It's high quality shit. I think everything displays well. Even the box it comes in is vertical. I think it's a safe buy. Like I said, it hasn't really gone down in 4 or 5 year old game at this point. 2019. Yeah.
I'm gonna say.
So if the movie takes off, this is going up. If they do make a sequel, this is going up. I'm not your financial advisor, but it's the same price pretty much. I would say it's a pretty safe bet. I would say this collector's edition, not the game, is worth it.
I'm going to say, what'd you say, 120?
That's what it retailed for.
What is it going for now?
150, 160, 170, that range. We saw it for 150 is what I'm saying. eBay is like 170 with shipping and shit. And you get
I'm going to say it's a close guess, but it's still a no. Yeah. I think the box is great. It's cool. It's got a box. Okay. Yeah. If you get it used anywhere at this point, the DLC is going to be useless. Yep. So let's just nix that. You got a cool patch and some stickers and an art book and some pins, which is cool. And then you've got a doo-doo looking statue. And so like to me, like when you put statues in collector's editions, like that is your centerpiece. I've spent a lot of money on collector's editions for statues specifically. This statue being worth $120 by itself is abysmal.
It's crazy.
I cannot believe that.
It stayed steady at that price.
If you told me everything else in the collector's edition is worth $30, I'd have been like, done all day so fast. Buy it without the statue. Yeah. Like, you get the game and some patches and like that would be like $30 for like a limited edition.
It's funny. There are knockoff statues floating around out there on like Temu and shit.
Maybe you got a knockoff because that looks bad, bro.
I bought it new. I pre-ordered this and bought it from.
I want to see what those look like. They have to be terrible.
The paint's not as good. It's pretty obvious.
Like if you told me this was Days Gone with a steel book and it had some patches and stuff in it and like a small package for like $80. Done deal.
No brainer.
That would have been awesome. But this statue pulls this down so far for me because the quality, it's terrible. And especially knowing the studio, Gentle Giant, is known for this quality.
Yeah.
And this is the worst Gentle Giant I've ever seen.
It feels like they made the bike, and they were like, great. And they're like, oh shit, you gotta add the guy and the zombie too. And they were like, oh fuck, just put action figures on it. Because like the bike looks great.
The bike is fantastic.
I almost kind of wish it was just the bike by itself.
Exactly.
And it'd be cool if you could like customize it.
And
Like if that was the case, I would feel very differently about this. But this, it's bad.
I know the character design went through a couple of different iterations, so I wonder if that was something where they were like, oh shit, we do have to like put Deacon on there.
The ground that this is sitting on
bad.
is God of War Ascension levels of bad.
Ooh,
It's terrible.
I have both of them. I think this looks a lot better than that.
You think it looks better?
Yeah.
Bro, maybe I haven't seen it in a while, but like,
That got worse. It's
look at the
it
back.
does look like a little
Look at the
Warhammer
back,
guy.
The
man.
back's not great.
The plant.
But look how good the bike looks. It's crazy. It's such a contrast. It's a perfect summary of this game, honestly. Like the goods are
They
high
couldn't
and the
commit.
fucking lows are yeah. Yep. It's a
So I have to say
best.
no, man. I think this statue just drags that price down. I could not like $120 for a statue and $30 for the rest of it.
Mm-hmm.
Oh no.
I'll say this too. This has everything I want in a collector's edition.
Mhm.
I got a statue. I got some cool shit to put up on wherever I don't have space for. I got, digital content. I got an art book. Like this has physical media soundtrack. This has everything I want in a collector's edition. And that kind of weighs my decision also. Even though I don't love the game, but if you're a Days Gone fan, pick this up. Like you'll love it.
I went into this episode kind of undecided, but Barry kind of brought up 2 points that I can't really argue. Brian, you make a good point of this does have everything I want in a collector's edition.
Absolutely. I think with all the extra bits, it's not just a statue of steel.
But Barry brought up 2 points. I just cannot ignore that. It's converted me. Like narrative-driven game needs to have a good narrative, and then we're not judging it based on the game. We're judging it based on the collector's edition. The statue is the selling point.
Mm-hmm.
And the statue's
100%. 100%.
So you're paying for the statue. The other stuff's goodies.
Yep.
And to me, the statue's not worth $120. If you're $80, I'm like, yeah, it's plastic. Fine. Gotta say no.
Here's another thing. If this was a series you loved, I think this is a resounding yes from everybody at the table. But I think the game not being up to expectations also determined that. I don't want to speak for y'all, but I will say this would have been, because I was back and forth. This is the most indecisive game I've ever played. I still don't know to this day if I was like, I enjoyed this game or if I didn't. There's definitely things I didn't. I think the negatives stand out a lot more than the positives. Even
They
though
always
like
will.
this is probably the most resounding graphics and sound I've seen in a long time for a game. But you can't build your game around that, man. Like there's, like you're saying, Sony has a certain level of like, we are a narrative studio. This is what we want. And this game failed in that regard. The story is so poor. Like it's one of the worst stories I've ever played.
Do you want a sequel?
I do.
What the hell are they going to do? What's the story? It's going to go even crazier.
You got
I'm
the
good.
sequel. It was crammed into this game.
I'm good.
It could have been an entire game and you find out Sarah's alive. And we go into the second game of like actually finding where she is. We end at the Rippers and you flood them with breaking the dam open as this big climactic end. And you get told like, that's where we're going next. We have confirmation that she's alive. And then the second game, you have to deal with the religious zealots and all that crazy stuff. That's 2 games in one.
Yeah.
You got the
There's
sequel.
3 games in
This game should have been 10 to 15 hours shorter.
I agree.
And I don't really want a sequel.
My biggest thing is like with how much it pushed to PS4 hardware, someone needs to do something with PS5. Like this whole console generation's just been a giant letdown for me, honestly. I think they're the right studio to be like, let's push this goddamn thing. Fuck 600 images on the screen. Can you imagine 1500? Like, that'd be awesome. Just make it
a fan of the studio overall for sure. Like I do really like the Siphon Filter games. Growing up with them were rad, but
yeah. That being said, I still think this is a yes. Like I said, I'm not your financial advisor, so don't listen to me. But I think if the movie does ever happen, if a sequel does ever happen, like this is going up. I'm
going to suggest you look at some real close-up pictures of that statue before you buy this.
Yeah.
And if you're okay with it, then buy it.
If you get a chance to touch one before you buy it. I think that'll sway you. It swayed me because I was kind of in the middle before we started recording, and I was like, man.
Yeah. No, it doesn't feel great.
No, the angle you have it right now where I can't see the characters in the front, it looks fantastic.
Yeah, but look at the ground.
Nope, eyes up.
Yeah. Honestly, if I were to display this, I would display it bike out.
Yeah.
On a shelf, just like that. You don't see no one else.
It's like such a perfect amalgam. Like it speaks to this game so much, dude. This statue is a perfect representation of this game. Like real pretty. And then you start looking a little deeper and you see the flaws. Like, we're going to close with that.
Foundation's bad.
Yeah. Dude.
Great paint job, though.
Great paint job, but that foundation. Whew. Yeah. So in conclusion, what do you guys think? Days Gone Faithful, come at us in the Discord or on social media. I mean, I know you're out there. It is fun. I will say, go read the reviews for this game. I spent a good hour and a half just flipping through them in bed, just being like, what the fuck? But it's an interesting game, man. There's a lot of meat on the bone. This is probably going to be one of our longest episodes. I'm glad I picked this game, all in all, because I finally got to play it. But now, I don't know if I have more answers or more questions. This was a really good conversation game for sure. Thank you guys for listening. Hey, Nate, what's next?
We're going to talk about endings of games that were just horrid, that ruined it for you. We're going over the worst endings in games in our opinion.
That's assuming I finished playing the games.
Some of them. Some of them, it's like, I'm just going to YouTube this boy. But
it's the whole game for this.
There's some, obviously, that if you know us and been listening to us, we're going to be on the list. But
do you think Mass Effect 3 is
I think you can truly make or break a game with an ending. So, I mean, there's some games that you kind of swim through the ending so good, you're like, all right. And there's some games that are so bad of an ending, I never want to touch this, and I'm going to throw this in the trash and burn it. So join us for that episode. Get a little toxic.
Kingdom Hearts 3. Mass Effect 3. It must be all the 3 games.
We appreciate you guys' support. Thanks for listening. Again, come defend Days Gone on social media.
Please, I need to know why. Please, I don't get it.
It's a genuine question. Like I said, this game's a 7. That's a fine score for this game. Please let me know why I'm wrong. Next time.
Stay oppressed.
Stay oppressed, y'all. Stay like Ben Studio oppressed.